I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's HR meeting and turn it over to Michelle. Sorry, I forgot. Is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none, Michelle? No, this is about the HR agenda. I'm new. Sorry. That's okay, no problem. It's confusing. Okay. Just make sure I speak my mind. Give me 6 chances to public comment.
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. There is one item on this evening's agenda under new business. It's policy 332, guidance counselors, 11-month employment. We are requesting the deletion of this policy per PSBA's recommendation. The language is not considered policy and better suited for an internal process such as a handbook. This item will appear on the May regular business meeting agenda for first reading, and then subsequently the June agenda for a second reading and possible board adoption for the deletion. Any questions? That concludes my items for this evening's meeting.
Well, I had a big meeting tonight, didn't I? Are there any public comments of a general nature?
Well, this is extraordinarily fast.
Could you come to the mic, please?
I know that my colleague in this matter is on her way in. So if we just give her a moment to get here, rather than actually want to start this. I'm here on her behalf as well.
So, you want to do that or wait until the next meeting? Okay.
Don't want to waste your time. I'm here for a matter that has affected my life as well. My name is Susan Westwood Denenberg. I have 2 students who go to, one in 6th grade, one in 8th grade. We've been White Marsh residents for their entire lives. So they did spend 2 years in a cyber school during the pandemic, and they both came back. Was it this year? No, it was last year. I think. And but I do believe at this moment I'm here because when Zoe came back to school this year as a 6th grader, the cafeteria and the bullying has become an issue, one that has kind of steamed in the background for certain situations. For Zoe, it didn't get bad enough that she actually got into an argument with anybody, but she did flee the cafeteria and she did go to the guidance counselor, and then she brought in one of her friends to eat lunch with her in the guidance counselor's office because the cafeteria kind of reminded me of a shark-infested water, because this is the time of the day that the students have more independence and more discretion and more choice and more freedom than they do at any other time of the day. So with that being said, they're so highly monitored throughout the day that when things are left a little bit looser, that's when the nastiness comes out and the threats come out and the meanness comes out, and it just seems that there's not enough guidance throughout. It's either the guidance needs to be there throughout the day, which includes cafeteria, which maybe assigned seats next year need to be constantly. Maybe how the students feel about it, because I really think that they're being it's being assumed that that's better for everybody, because there's really a lot going on. Teachers aren't there. They deserve a lunch. My daughter says they deserve a lunch, Mom. And I said, of course they deserve a lunch. But 2 security guards that don't know the students and don't interact with them when this is a time where they need mediation. Because this is where it starts. This is where it starts. And then you got the cafeteria, and then you have the after school stuff. And I mean, I'm not there with the kids. You guys have a better idea how the tides and the currents in the building go. And maybe you don't realize how secretive it is. And then we also have media. Things stem along overnight, and then when they come back to school the next day, I just don't think students are given very good steps as far as consequence. I don't think consequence has been very 100% consistent. I don't think the students are given enough idea of what to expect if they make this decision. We know their brains aren't done growing. We know they're not good at consequential thinking. So why don't we make that consequential thinking not something they have to be good at? something they have to be aware of and thoughtful with. And so, I mean, Zoe rose above the situation, but I spent 4 hours as a mom. I called 2 parents, I called the guidance counselor, I talked with my daughter, and I'm sure all parents, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 22 years. I can talk to I can talk to kids. And I use that ability to do so, but we know that every parent doesn't have the time or the talent. So anyway, I know we're all here for the right reason, but I just think that we have to address the changes and we have to be more consistent with their consequences, and there has to be more equal distribution of awareness. What happened with this daughter, what happened with this son, we can't blanket statement that. We have to watch out because things are just, there's so many different influences in different ways. So I don't know if it's going to make a difference, guys, but I don't want to have to feel like if my daughter's going to be bullied, it's the luck of the draw. Because nothing happens to the kids who are bullying her. Hasn't. So I just got the ball rolling. So I'm talking more about this.
Well, if I could respond,
Criteria. Yeah.
certainly appreciate your comments, and your concern is my concern. I was a middle school principal for a long time before moving into central office, so I certainly understand the importance of, one, that unstructured time, lunchroom, passing time. Kids love seeing their friends, and so we want to take advantage of that within reason, because it has to be a safe place first. Whether it's the lunchroom, on the bus, in the classroom, kids aren't going to learn unless they feel safe. And middle school presents significant challenges, and it's very different than when I was in middle school many, many years ago, because it's become 24/7 with social media and all those other distractions that can impact our students' lives. I've seen middle school students go to school together and be best friends on a Friday, and then on Monday morning they come in and they're not talking to one another. And as parents and as educators, we try to piece together what's going on. But I think we need a combination of proactive things to address smaller things before they become bigger things. But there always is going to have to be that reactionary and, unfortunately, consequences for making poor decisions. So starting things like having lunch bunches with smaller groups and talking with kids, whether it's with a counselor or an assistant principal, making sure we have plenty of people circulating throughout the cafeteria, noticing if suddenly somebody's sitting alone or changes their seat on their own. That takes a lot for a student to do that, change their seat on their own, particularly in middle school, because kids notice things. So, Mr. Kaplan and the administrative team put out that email yesterday to our families because Friday was not a great day for our middle school. It doesn't mean we don't have great kids. We certainly do. And we need to continue to build off of those positives, but we need to continue to make sure that we're giving those kids an opportunity to express their concerns when they have them. We're not going to tolerate bullying, and we need to have strong programs in place that help reinforce that. So I certainly appreciate you sharing those concerns. And I did speak to several parents today.
The only thing I want to say is being a teacher that was lucky enough to work in the suburbs, in the inner city, with every grade, except 12, every grade. And I do know, and I'm sure you respect the mind of a middle schooler. I'm sure you do, because we know that those middle schoolers are so different and so smart and so aware and determined that changing of a lunch seat, which happens more than you think, not even by choice, by glance, by stare, by my friend going this way to a table with these girls, and me stuck standing here wondering what happened. And that, to me, comes down to social media, strategy, decision-making, power, control, and all the beautiful things of being a young lady. So I was there long ago. They're there now. It's a different game. It carries through. It's lethal at times, more than you and I really even know. And I'm saying that with all due respect, because we'll never know exactly what they go through. And sometimes middle school students do not know how to differentiate from emotions and students saying to them, I know this is what's going to happen, because I know either because she's just going to say it and she's going to back it up somehow with a lie, or she's not. But these beautiful young people can't discern the differences, and it's huge and it's present and it's something that's going to be acted upon that you and I never had. Get it?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, I'll stop now. I just want that perspective to be out there because you can put in all the mediations that you want, but we teach them how to be bullies by telling them what not to do. And that's just a way to look at it. Not saying to do it, but I'm saying that's what they can do with it. So you got 2 more years of me. No, just kidding. But thank you for listening, guys. I try to keep a sense of humor about everything, so I just want to make sure that I don't have to wonder what the behavior plans are going to be for the kids in their school. All right, I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for coming. Yes.
Thank you. Sue and I have been kind of tag teaming this whole thing, and I sat in front of this board.
Just for the record, could you state your name?
Oh, yep, Monique Parker,
Thank you.
and we're in Plymouth.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I stood before this same board, first board meeting in September about my daughter who was called the N-word 27 times on social media. And then we had a synergy behind that with, you know, having some type of in-services for parents about social media. And then there were a bunch of, you know, programs that were enacted. And then I talked to Dr. Christian today, and I did have to make a point that all of that stopped. Where did it go? You know, we then stopped all of the, you know, no place for hate. My daughter's in no place for hate. Her teacher had a baby. And so most of those were canceled because they couldn't find somebody to then continue on with the no place for hate classes. So then what are they to do? They looked forward to this club. And so the bullying ramped up again. We know that there was a new director that was hired, and she's been, you know, focused on the high school. The middle school is where we need that. And again, I was hoping that in the beginning, with all the synergy that was behind the in-services for the kids, and then for us parents looking at what social media does, and then a lot of the programs that started right after I brought that derogatory statement that my daughter was called to the board, it just all fell flat. So again, I have to challenge everyone toward the end of the class and looking into the summer. When we do come back, we need to put as much focus back in that and keep it going. Because if we're telling our kids we want you to continue on a path of straight and narrow, but we can't even adhere to what we're asking to continue these programs and continue the education of social media. Sue made a great point. I challenged the board about that in the beginning. What are the clear-cut decisions about if someone does X, then you get Y? She mentioned it. It's not the same, right? And so I unfortunately, our daughter was involved in an 8th grader pursuing her, enticing her, you know, harassing her, putting her hands on her twice, and then she had no other choice but to defend herself. And so now we're here where she's also suspended. Fine, I have to live with that, but Monet changed her lunch seat. She went to the counselor. She changed, you know, what she wanted to do in terms of friends. She told people, I will not, you know, be your friend anymore because of this. And then she then was met at the end of the day with an 8th grader fighting her, putting her hands on her. So had we been keeping along with those programs that we started in the beginning, letting these kids know about the social media, you know, you have examples of what we see from social media and then what it leads to. They know what it leads to, but do they know the consequence behind it? It's not in writing. So I stand here again, almost to the end of the year, saying the same thing. We need to get those in writing, and we need to restart those trainings and all of those programs that we had in the beginning, start them back up, even though we have a little bit left of schooling. But the kids right now, it's cabin fever time. They're ready to get out of school, and they have nothing better to do. Ray and I, we know what type of child we raise at home. Respectful, you know, diversity, inclusion, we talk all of that. It's not just something we say just for kicks and giggles because it's something we want to say in the world today. No, we live and breathe that. But we don't know, and we often hear of other parents, you know, doing the opposite, breeding hate in their house. And so how do we teach our daughter to combat that without physically feeling attacked and then having to defend herself? She fell back into a corner. But then I also said, we have to think about in the world today, If we then come into a situation where now we have to lock down a school, did you do everything to protect that child in the beginning? You know, if these kids are reaching out for help and going to counselors, is it reaching the appropriate parties? One, are they following through with it? Two, and then three, if you know that there is a hostile environment, how much more, you know, not necessarily police activity, but how much more is that child monitored so that nobody is continuously harassing them or making true on the threats of beating them up?
I appreciated the time we had on the phone today and the candor. I was remiss, Mrs. Figueroa Douglas, our EIB officer, and I was remiss in telling you this. She does have, and they were scheduled prior to Friday's situation. She has middle school programs set up for next week. But I agree with you. We need to keep the momentum going forward, particularly, obviously, in the area of equity, inclusion, and belonging, but also digital citizenship and social media. I think Mr. San Francisco was very well received in the fall, but I'm thinking going into next year, we need to do something on a smaller group level. It's great to have a big assembly. We had a good parent night with decent turnout, but smaller group meeting with kids in the classroom and talking about the specifics. Hey, here's what can happen when you do this. And I know we talked about it at length. But here's the damage that you can do to your friends. And here's also the other problems you can have as a result of this and leaving your digital footprint and how permanent it is. Aside from the fact how hurtful it can be. Or in addition, I'm sorry, not aside. So I do appreciate the time you gave me today and certainly work with the middle school on this.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming out.
Can I ask a question? So I just want, not to you, to Dr. Christian. Thank you, Ms. Parker. Thank you both for sharing. I'm just, you know, as a former principal, know a lot of the research around suspension and that doesn't necessarily change behavior. Yes, it's good to put the consequences out there. We want everyone to know that, you know, these are the consequences and things like that.
Sure.
One of the things that I wonder about, and I probably don't know as much as I should, is around the proactive piece that you were talking about. And in terms of like restorative practices. So if student A and student B have a conflict and it doesn't, you know, get to the point that it was there, what kind of restorative practices, restorative justice, harm and healing circles, like what practices do we have at the middle school? And are we doing enough there? I guess it's a very broad question, but would love to hear more.
And I can give you a summary answer right now, but I can have Mrs. Burke talk about what our counselors do and our community counselors do. We have all types of groups for students. For conflict resolution, and the community counselors are a great asset with that in addition to our school counselors. And then, you know, we also try to, when some of the lower level discipline, we give students an opportunity to go do counseling than a traditional detention, and talk about, you know, why something occurred and try to solve things at the smallest possible level. We absolutely can be restorative. Certainly there are things that get bigger and there need to be consequences for the greater safety of the building, and so that you know, we can hopefully curb those behaviors. But I'll put together a broader list for the board. We can do a presentation on it as well.
Dr. Christian, can you quickly, we have a grant, we got a grant for next year for, you want to just mention that at the middle school? For the restore somebody to do the restore, like a new person.
Yeah, we've applied for a few. So I know we had the trauma-informed care grant and one on conflict resolution, and then another one for hardware, you know, radios, those types of things. So
Conflict resolution one, I remember we talked about, that's going to start next year, I think.
absolutely.
And I appreciate that. And I know that there are I know we're doing a ton already, but
We can be better.
in terms of strategy and things like that, I'm just thinking, you know, it's really important when I've disrupted the entire class, that there's a way that I'm re-entered into that class that makes it safe for the students who are in that class, and so that I can have a do-over and a next step. I have to take responsibility for what I've done. I have to share the impact that I've had, those sort of things. So, you know, I look forward to seeing the list. I guess I'll leave it there.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I certainly can share it. Absolutely. Yep.
And with that list, or, you know, whatever you're going to compile for us to take a look at, I don't know how, I'm sure there's a way that you track, but the number of detentions, suspensions, what they're for, there's a million things happening at a middle school all at the same time, and they're not every incident is taken the same way as similar instances. It's just human nature, right? A different teacher may, see something and report it, where another teacher may see something and handle it in the classroom. Do you know what I mean? Nothing too extreme, but, as comprehensive as possible, because I'm curious if it's even possible to find out, are all of the teachers taking things in the same way and knowing how to respond in certain situations? Are they all, getting sent to the principal, all of the students who are in these situations? Or how many times are they trying to be handled? Restorative practices are tremendously effective, but there's only to a point, like you said, there needs to be consequences. So if I'm going to try to have a restorative classroom and fix it myself, are those things getting to the report so that we know those things are happening even more than maybe detentions and suspensions are happening?
Sure.
So that's obviously just like the climate and culture of the school in general, but just curious how that's happening. And then my other little question, what kind of, I know we have cameras in our middle school. What are hall monitoring and stair monitoring processes? I'm sure teachers have their before school and after school duties. Do we have people in the stairwells, at the corners of the hallways, things like that to keep an eye?
Our teachers will be at their doorways in between classes, greeting kids. Passing time is an unstructured time, especially when they're moving from the classroom wing down to the cafeteria. That's probably the longest journey that our students make during the day. So they could be in a stairwell, and we don't always have, we have, 3 security guards at the middle school, but they're not in every stairwell.
Yeah.
They're moving, circulating throughout the building. They're in the lunchrooms. The principals are out and moving around. And
And that should be
generally,
enough.
generally in a middle school, anecdotally from my experience, passing time and the unstructured time are when some things tend to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't say this, I'm not joking in any fashion. I was a high school assistant principal, I was a middle school principal for a lot of years. I won't put a percentage on it, but a vast majority of discipline cases happen when a principal is not around. And sometimes and often when an adult's not around. And so you're piecing together what happened. And so Ms. Parker and I had a very lengthy conversation today about what antecedents may have led to certain things, rather than just somebody who picks up their phone and records 17 seconds of something. What happened an hour before? What happened 2 days before? And trying to address those things when they're small and resolve them before they escalate. What other players were involved that may have acted as a catalyst to something.
And that's sort of my point with what happens in the classroom.
Sure.
It's hard for everybody to know what's happening in all of those classrooms throughout the day. Whereas I know that this student is having a really bad day, and they had a little bit of a conflict with this student during class, and I thought I squashed it as the teacher, But, giving something else for the teachers to do is awful to think of, but, who were you going to tell? Is there a way to, whatever.
Understood.
Can I ask a question? It seems that their dismissal time seems to be a time where there is trouble reported or noticed. Have we considered looking at the dismissal procedure that we have and maybe altering that in some way to not have a big mob of kids, coming out at the same time, maybe stagger it a little bit or anything like that?
We certainly can take a look at that.
So yes, we're going to look at that. We need to look at how we're not letting upper class. She was, getting ready for high school in the mind of touching a still fifth grader to me. They're still elementary school kids touching a sixth, right? So I think that's a phenomenal way to look at this. It could have been worse.
Could you come up to the microphone?
Yeah, we can't all hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The bigger question I have is, speaking on that incident, how did someone, by the way, my name is Ray Johnson, I'm sorry. how did somebody was able to go in the auditorium and retrieve this 8th grader and have the 8th grader come out and then approach Monet? Like, if you have monitors, if you have people outside, how did you allow somebody to go in there, tell the 8th grader that, oh yeah, this girl outside wants to fight you, and then they come from inside to outside to start trouble? It seems like there's a lot of time in
This-
between.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Dismissal time is unstructured, and we have
Yeah.
1,150 kids, and we have about 12 minutes to get to get our students to the buses and get there safely. And we can certainly take a look at staggering the times as best we can. And students should have a reasonable expectation, and as parents, I think we all can agree with this, you should be able to walk to your bus and get on your bus unfettered.
Yeah.
And that should be, and students should be able to, at the middle school level, learn, hey, I need to walk away and I need to get to my bus.
Yeah,
And
no,
so,
I understand that part, but what I'm saying is, if you, during this time, I'm sure you have people that are outside. You have
Sure.
monitors. You have people that are administering the kids as they get on the bus and things of that nature. How is one out there ready to get on the bus? And how does all of this occur with no one seeing it, able to stop that process from happening? That part I don't understand. I haven't seen the video, but I don't understand how one is able to retrieve someone out of the auditorium and to come outside in the midst of all of that and still find this individual and cause a fight. To me, it sounds like no one was monitoring anybody.
I do hear your concern, and I'm not trying to be argumentative. We
Yeah.
have security guards out there, we have teachers out there, we have principals out there, kids are going to sports practices, kids are going to the car line, kids are going to the buses, and it is possible, somebody, not knowing, exactly how it occurred, sometimes somebody says, I forgot a book, and they run back in and go get a book. So
Yeah. I understand that.
there are people out there, and there actually was a security guard. I saw the video. There was a guard within about 10, 15 feet. Unfortunately, the situation still occurred.
Right.
But we do have people there, and this week I've added additional people just to make sure that things remain calm, because we need to be able to have kids feel safe in school, and they need to be able to get to their buses. They need to be able to get to their next class without any problem. The focus needs to be on instruction.
Yeah.
And even though it is May and I know we're getting close, they have to feel safe so that they're ready to learn. It is, and I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but
No,
I
I
certainly
understand.
appreciate the question and
Yeah.
the suggestion.
Okay.
I would say maybe the de-escalation practice that we're using, because again, yes, he didn't see the video, I didn't show him, I didn't want to infuriate him more.
Understood.
We watched the video. There was somebody there, but the child, Monet, with him coming in between them again. That was the second hit. So then at that point, Monet is just ready to fight, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that the hospitals we had our de-escalation tactics, and they were. And not necessarily that the hospital, but if it's getting to the point where somebody is still able our hands on another student, I remember seeing them, some other practices.
Thank you.
Here's one thing I want you guys to all think about the situation, okay? You have two young ladies, both in 6th grade, okay? For whatever situation, it is somewhat of a common group of girls, the girls that cause this in both scenarios, separate scenarios. And they're in the cafeteria, in the unstructured cafeteria, which I don't want to take away from them either, but I just want to make sure that they understand the consequences, because what's happening is that the nurse's office and the guidance counselor's office stepped in and gave my child and her child solace, a safe place to call for a moment, to stay in, to get upset or to have lunch or to do whatever it is they need to do. But they fled the cafeteria, fled. So think within 6 weeks of each other, these two girls, two separate occasions, both fled the cafeteria. And they're both wonderful, intelligent, beautiful, smart young ladies. But this is the kind of scenario that exists in the cafeteria, under the watchful eyes of everybody else. So it is happening. So I just thought it was uncanny that both of us had those two situations in common from the same couple of girls, and they both fled the scene. And so don't, so the guidance counselors and the nurses out there, there are, soft warriors. So I'm so glad they opened the door and let them in. But just an awareness, just an observation.
To clarify, I do have a sixth grader and eighth grader as well, and I don't think anyone here on the board thinks that anyone should be able to physically assault anyone in the building, regardless of age, gender, difference. Like, the goal is to design policies that no one is assaulting anyone, and, we've also put a lot of, and if this is correct, this is the first year the middle school radically overhauled their discipline program this year with Mr. Kaplan. They brought in a new program to try and get better at both discipline and rooting out the major issues, but also trying to root out some of the implicit bias and kind of harassing kids and trying to make them all feel safe. And it's Mr. Kaplan's second year in the building, and two assistant principals first year. So there's that natural learning curve of getting to know the students. So for the eighth graders, it's 3 new administrators, a new discipline system. So there's some of that as well.
Yeah, but that
could
doesn't
improve over
mitigate
time.
what our responsibility is. We have to keep kids safe, and yes, they're trying to do more restorative practices. And there's always going to be that balance.
Are there any more public comments or questions? Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, this meeting's adjourned.
At this time, I'd like to call the FMT meeting to order. Are there any public comments on the agenda for FMT? Seeing none, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Will. The first item on tonight's agenda is the CES renovation discussion that we started to discuss at our last meeting last month. If I can, I'd like to bring Kevin up again from GKO. What we did is we broke down the scenarios, and I don't know if everyone had a chance to see it, but the options, and we put them into a matrix that the board requested so that everyone could see the timeline and some of the challenges that come and what we would actually get from each option. So we did go through, excuse me, options, there was 4 options, 1 through 4. But I think I wanted Kevin to start, if it's okay with the board, with option 4, because we did put a couple of twists in option 4 that are new for the board to hear and see. So if it's okay, I'd like Kevin just to explain what we did. So now 4 is giving you a 4A, a 4B, and a 4C. So, and not to make this crazier, but I think last meeting we spoke about option 4 being one of the stronger possibilities. So we wanted to investigate that a little bit more deeply and see if there are any options within that option. Kevin?
Great. Thank you. So if I break down the difference between 4A, 4B, and 4C, they're all variations on option 4. They all take half the gymnasium, they move district office into that half a gymnasium, and they renovate district office spaces. The difference between them is that 4A is what's the least that I have to do in order to accommodate the students that are coming to this building. And we talked about it last time, what's the right number of classrooms? We targeted that there were 150 additional students that are landing here in 2 years. That could be 6 classrooms if it's 25 per classroom. We said 8 because there's special education needs. I think there's even some pressure on the existing building. I think we may have even migrated to say 10 is really a pretty good number. So option 4A is just the way it worked out, 11 classrooms. And what that would entail would be taking half the gymnasium. It would have a first floor and a second floor, but it would only move the district offices down this side and this side of this corridor. It does not move pupil services. Pupil services would stay where they are. We would not need the second floor wrestling room with that. So what we're basically saying with that option is it accommodates the students that are coming to this building right now. And there is an opportunity. We would design it in such a way that this could have a phase 2. If 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, you need more classrooms, then pupil services is going to go up where the wrestling room would have been, and we'd renovate those classrooms. I think the other thing is the administration area, the building administration. It's up on the second floor. Option 4A and 4B, do not move that downstairs and renovate that into classrooms. So that's another thing. And that's what you're seeing here. There's 11 classrooms with 4A. If you move pupil services, it goes up to 15 classrooms. But I do have to caution, pupil services does not have an exterior window. This is an elementary school program, but as I understand it, they're teaching in pairs. So you still have students, you have students moving in and out of classrooms. We don't necessarily worry about not having a window in every classroom if the students are going in and out, but in elementary school, lower grades, they're not going in and out, they're staying in that room all the time. So option 4B does have 15 classrooms, albeit the last 4 are in pupil services and are dark. And the last version, 4C, is saying that we're going to take the administration from the second floor, we're going to bring it down to the first floor, we're going to renovate pupil services, we're going to renovate the old office upstairs. How many classrooms could we get? 18, is the number. Now, there's one other thing that traces through these 3 options. If you remember back to option 2, and if you notice on the matrix, I think schemes need a title, right? They all need to have 2 words that sort of synthesize them. So option 1 is lease space. Option 2 is side addition. Option 3 was the addition back in the corner. If you remember the side addition version, the reason that we had done that is, just as a reminder, it was basically building an addition off of this entrance off to the side and making it the public entrance to the building. No more do visitors come through the corridor system of this building. They would come up the side and report there. First floor was district office. Second floor was the school administration. There was an elevator and a stair tower in that little addition to make that happen. I think it was recommended by one of the board members, could we apply that principle to option 4? Yeah, 4C does that. 4C basically says, take the administration, the building administration from the second floor, put them, redevelop this corner of the office here and put the addition there. As we talked about last time, it's not an intuitive entrance into this building. We're bringing them to the side, but there's really no other way to do it. At least there's no other way to get the addition on the exterior wall. So the idea would be there'd be signage out front, there'd be a walking canopy. It's a long way to walk. Everybody's walking it right now. It's just, it would be outside instead of inside. We'd give them a covered canopy. We'd give them signage out front. We'd make it very clear. I'll move the flagpole over here to sort of help celebrate where that entrance is. So 4C is carrying the extra money of that, renovating this for administration and adding the sidewalk. 4A and 4B are making a secure vestibule up front. So there's, I think it's a snack bar right now that was there when the basketball, the varsity basketball played in this building. So renovate that for a secure area, and we'd have a secure vestibule. So a person entering this building would actually enter into the vestibule that they would have the door to the auditorium, although that door would be locked. They would have a door to the gymnasium, but students can still get in and out of the gymnasium by the door that's closer here. So we're eliminating that cross traffic. We're keeping everybody up front in that secure vestibule. It might be possible that you could have a manned station there and possibly a small conference room for IEP meetings, but we basically keep people up front. We don't let them walk through the corridor system of the building. The challenge is that corridor is extremely important when there's something happening in that auditorium. So we got to find a way to make sure that the doors are as wide as they can be. And on those nights, they'd have to be open and people would have to still use that entire corridor system. Neither of these options are ideal, but we just believe, it's our opinion, that if money's going to be spent on this building, the security system should be dealt with. The public corridor, the entrance of visitors from the outside, and the access of adults to the corridor system of the building should be dealt with. So there's 2 ways of doing that. It's the vestibule up front or move the entrance to the side.
Kevin, just a quick question. So with all that said, you're talking about the administrative offices for the school being over here.
Yes.
Since the kids enter through I guess, I'm thinking, it seems logical, but I guess then the parents would have to come in this way, that the administrative offices might be where pupil services are.
Well, that's an option as well. And if we do the secure vestibule version, we probably would try to move the administration there, move them down into pupil services and get them closer. But we would still want to do the public interaction, the sign-in, the waiting, and hopefully the conference room in a location far enough forward that students can still get in and out of the gymnasium without walking past
Gotcha.
adults
Okay.
walking back into the building.
Thanks.
Now, there's another thing to be said. The person up front is very, very isolated. You know, they are not, usually we have someone managing the front door, they're part of an administrative suite. There's people around them. If something does happen, if they're uncomfortable in some way, they're not all by themselves. That secure station up there, that person would really be by themselves.
But we also talked about putting a door in that secured station.
Yeah.
So that the person could exit out of there if there was a situation.
Does that location, since we salvaged some space up here for classrooms on both sides, right?
Right.
Is there any access from that old snack bar? Is there a hallway? You have to go through the auditorium, don't you?
You have to go through the auditorium.
But could you, is there any, what I'm thinking is, could you use those classrooms as administrative offices and have it all be connected?
I mean, you could. I guess I don't see, I think we were just looking at putting someone in, so to speak, where the concession stand is behind glass.
No, I get that, but I'm saying, could that,
Good idea.
Yeah.
could that concession stand then have a hallway to
Right.
connect it to those classrooms, which then become part of the administrative offices?
We could look at that. We'd have to look at
Right.
egress, make sure we can get out because of the auditorium. The reality is going to be too, with an increase of 100 to 125
Need
kids.
more
We're going to need
administrators.
another assistant principal.
Right.
And I would put that individual down here,
Yeah.
close to the cafeteria, close
But
to
you-
the new classroom.
Yeah, I'm just thinking you could have some there so that person wouldn't be as isolated and have some in the pupil services area. I mean, I don't like the idea of someone being so isolated either. I mean,
Right.
I wouldn't want it to be me. You know, I don't think anybody should be
No,
that isolated.
what Dean currently does, part of his daily routine, he's our security guard that's here now. Every morning after drop-off's done, he goes in through the main doors to make sure the auditorium's secure, the gym is secure, because of that long walk. So we've been trying to, Joe has really been, they've been trying to come up with something. They don't want Ann so isolated out front there, but we do want something closer
Yeah,
to the door.
I mean, I don't even know if it's physically possible to get from that old snack bar to these classrooms to build a hallway that wouldn't obstruct the entrance and exit from the auditorium.
I don't think you'd have to go out into the hallway to do it somehow. You couldn't go the other way to get up there because next to it is where the phys ed teachers are, right? Going straight up the hallway. And then you have a custodial class, so you'd have to go either in the auditorium and up to get to the classrooms or out in the hallway and up.
That's why I don't do your job, Joe.
Thanks. Yeah, I just think that gets, and like Dr. Christian said, egress definitely doesn't work in the auditorium. But we were just thinking, even if it was a door, if you were up there and you were isolated, that got you into the auditorium, that you could go somewhere else. In an emergency, you weren't isolated because you could move in there.
There is one other way of thinking about it, that these recently renovated classrooms, if they connected to the gym, now the students would have a path to get in and out of the gym without walking through that public lobby. That would take the interaction out of it, because at that point, the entire public lobby would be totally for visitors, and no student would have to walk through there unless they were going to the auditorium. And I'm imagining that's very rare that the students are using that auditorium.
It's an option.
I have a question, because I have the original option 4 that you showed. And the original option 4 and your 4C from tonight both put school administration down on the first floor. So what is the difference in the actual design, like, are we, this original 4, you're not actually adding on anything, right, except for in the front?
Right.
And is that the same, I mean, I really couldn't tell the tiny 4C,
That's true of all those options as well. We're not putting, the only addition would be a little something out front, kind of an entrance vestibule into the district office. The difference in these schemes, 4C versus what we presented last time, was the idea of when we pull the school administration downstairs, put it on the outside wall, put the canopy in, put signage in, try to get people, well, people would have to enter the building inside. That's probably the big distinction between those, what we had last month, what we're showing this month.
Okay. But is the original 4 still on the table, or are we done with the original 4?
Well, the original 4 would just be without the doing anything with the security area. I believe was the original 4, right?
Right. The original 4 didn't have anything happening with.
Up front.
Right.
So, I mean, it could be on the table, but again, we're just trying to address as many security issues as we were adding classrooms and more volume of people into the building.
Why, and I wasn't here when we discussed this before, why classrooms over there and not up here? So we're from looking at this, there'll be classrooms built up on that second level there, yes?
Well, that's actually occupied space right now. We're not building over the library.
Oh.
Right.
That's actually, the administration's up there
All right,
now.
I don't know how to read a map. My bad. Okay.
So the idea was if the administration moves down, then we could take the area,
That's what.
occupied
understood.
administration,
Okay.
and carve
And
that
there's
into
no chance we
classrooms.
could ever use any of all of this space?
Well,
We looked at it years ago when we did it, and the cost and the space and where you would have to add steel columns to actually support it, it's space management. It really didn't give us a lot because what you would have to put on this in the middle of the floor to hold it up.
Got it. Okay.
and the construction would be akin to building a ship in a bottle.
Oh, yeah, that'd be
Right.
fun.
Everything has to come in through windows.
All
or-
right, okay, I'll learn how to read a map.
So, I'm sorry.
That's right, I just want to say, I prefer to have CES administration on the first floor, just my preference. So I think a little more now confused than I was before.
There's a lot of options out there. Neither of these are a clear-cut winner. I think maybe at some level it's a decision about, do we want to build for what you expect is coming that you can anticipate right now and understand that there could be a renovation in the future where you go back and have to do more? Or do you want to make a bigger gesture today and hopefully put this building, in good shape well into the future?
I think my question is there any we can eliminate that we've said, this just doesn't make sense, like leasing space, right? Do we agree upon that it doesn't make sense? I know we're not voting or anything like that, but I just feel like, is there a way to narrow leasing space? Is there a way to narrow this down so that we can have more specific conversation around one or two versus just looking at?
Yeah. I mean, I think there is. Dr. Christian and I met with Miss Rock, the principal, obviously, and Mark and I with, Karen Berg, Pupil Services, and we went over their needs and what would be, bare minimum for them, what they could do. So the 8 classroom option, I think we all agree, becomes very difficult because it's very small. So I don't believe, and I don't want to speak for Dr. Christian and Mark, but I don't think that option, while it was great and we wanted to present it to everyone after speaking with the, Karen and Mrs. Roth, kind of figured it, we're probably more in that 10, 11 range, possibly even 12.
As a base. That's what
We
you're saying,
recommend
as a floor.
eliminating options
Right.
1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
And we think the board should consider 4A, 4B, 4C, and we can talk about like paring some of those down, getting what we need. But you're going to need 8 regular ed classrooms, probably 2 classrooms for special education and/or reading specialists, and then you have to think also too about specials. So when you add a certain number of students, that means they also get music, they also get art, they also get, so you're looking at probably 2 specialist rooms, so that gets you to 12. So we look, I think there's can be some healthy dialogue whether to renovate the upstairs administrative offices. They could probably stay because they're central to the building. If you're adding an assistant principal, put an office down here for the second assistant principal. So you have somebody close to the main entrance. But we'd like the board to consider 4A, 4B, 4C.
I have a question. With the 15 class, I think that's 4B, I can't see it up there. But are there any options for like what we can do with those classrooms in the meantime, since we're saying that we're probably going to be around somewhere between 10 and 12 that we need in a few years? But like, are there any real advantages to maybe adding something in the meantime? Because I still think that 2025, 2026 is we're really going to bump up.
So
But just ideas for use, since we're saying we probably need between 10 and 12, with 4B and of course 4C for between 15 and 18 classrooms. If we do that plan where we have those additional classrooms, are there any additional things that we can do for our student population that makes it more advantageous to our community to say, oh, okay, we have these extra classrooms. We're not just hanging coats in them. We're doing this program, we're doing that program until we do get, a population where we need to fill those classrooms. So I'm just
definitely we would use the space to address and improve our autistic support program. We look at a sensory room, which we have in our elementary schools, our life schools program, our students who are at White Marsh. And those classes have very specific ratios that you have under the Pennsylvania Department of Education. You have to limit the number of students in those classes. So those would be 2 programs that I expect would expand. If you look at the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, the early intervention numbers, they are increased across the board throughout the county for all school districts. So we're really looking at making a good, strong 20-year decision, if not 40-year decision here. So those would be the areas of focus, where I think the additional classrooms would be very helpful.
And I'd like to throw out there, the last time we renovated this, we talked about, we knew the wrestling program was up there, but we were talking about getting rid of it. And I wish, in hindsight, we had renovated that space. It is space that has just been dormant for years now, since the high school renovations. And before that, all it was used for was wrestling. So we have space in the building, and I think to do any alternative that doesn't use that space, to me, seems silly.
And I think we know what a disruption, potentially construction can be to a school, that I think we need to really look long-term because, we need to, we're here to educate. We do a big project to have to turn around and do it in, 10 years later again, I think is, not in the best terms of, we want things calm, smooth. And I know you said, you have a pretty solid plan for, not disrupting the educational process that goes on. But I think we have to look long-term, and we do seem to keep growing and growing. So I sort of say, 11 classrooms, it sounds like we're really, the 15 to 18 is where we're probably going to be, moving forward eventually.
I would agree. And I think that while we're doing it, again, I just think that the building administration, we should make that move at the same time, not later.
What do you mean when you say building administration? You mean moving the CES administration down?
Yes, because, we've adapted this space multiple times. And each time you do, you're spending more money and you're changing the space and you're rearranging things. So why not get it right the first time? or in this case, the second time.
And 10 years from now, or 10
Right.
years from now, it's even more expensive.
Right, right. So I just think if the administration, DO administration, believes that it's in the best interest of everybody to have the CES administration down here and have outside entrance into that space directly, then let's do it now.
Just to add to that real quick, is it fair to say that if we went with 4C, that we would be completely maxing out the space in this building? Is that accurate?
Yes.
And B and C both use the wrestling room space? Okay.
Yeah, actually, 4,
It's partial.
4A did not,
Right, but B
Right.
and C do.
but yeah.
Do we have costs on these? Because sure, I'd love 18 classrooms, but what's the price differential?
17 to 19 versus 20 to 22.
Got it. Yeah, I can't
And
see
then
that.
magnify like 100 times.
It's all good.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I guess, is that what we're talking about in our finance meeting? That's part of finance?
We'll tie right into it.
Okay, great, thank you.
So if we, I mean, again, if we can lock into something, it would be ideal to give GKO some direction, possibly next month. If the board is, agrees with that, the more time they have to actually put the plan together, the tighter the bid is, the better numbers we get. And, so I know it's not an easy decision, but the sooner it would be better, because then we can get them to work, because we are talking about September of 2025.
Why don't we take 4B and 4C, Joe, and put together larger plans, put them in board docs for the board, so they could see sort of a phasing, Kevin and Joe.
Sure.
What would be done in the summer, what would be done during the school year, so it's the least disruption to our instructional program, or what would be done the second summer. Part of the impetus of this is the 513 first graders that we have right now, so they'll be here in 2.25 years. So really our goal is to have the board give GKO direction by June, so we can get more specific plans for a final fall approval, which then starts the timeline for getting out the bid and all those other things. So if we can do that, get that to the board, I think we can then, at least the board can give GKO solid direction going into the summer months. Is that a fair timeline, Kevin?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit flabbergasted that we're looking at 22 million like it's a drop in the hat. From what I heard you say, or whoever told me, yeah, it was you, my friend, about the number of classrooms that we needed. And the difference between A and B is when we would need it, we could then add 4 more classrooms. I just don't understand why we're worried about what the tax rate we're about to raise taxes. So I'm just a little hesitant at looking at such a big number, and that's fine if I'm the only one, and happy to look at the detailed plans, but it sounds like 4A would more than suffice. And then in 10 years, if we do need to do additional renovations, those kids are way out of here. They will not have to deal with construction twice. I don't know. It's just a lot of stinking money.
I
And
think-
we have a lot
There
of.
is, if I can just interrupt for a second, Kathy, there is the emergency generator is in there, replacement, air conditioning for the gym, and air conditioning for the auditorium, which were all capital reserve projects, are all thrown into that number too.
Okay. That
That
does make
helps a
me
little.
feel a little better. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
And
Right.
I think, Kathy, the idea of 4A is really just hitting the minimum of, almost the minimum.
Sounded like our minimum was 8.
No,
Not with the
No.
special.
no, not with special ed and specialists and on autistic support class and assorted things. We're looking, you said 11? I think the number somebody said was
11 or 12.
11 or 12, yeah.
And then that's just for the actual first grade population. That's not even I don't think you guys finished the survey with
Right, so we
whoever's in pre.
yet, so I don't want to spend $5 more million for something we don't know what
But we kind of do, because the pandemic, we already know that there's an increase in the birth rate. We know people are moving here, so we can kind of understand it's going to grow. We just don't know how much.
We'll have the enrollment report to the board within a few days. We just got it, so Mark and I are looking at it with Joe. So we'll include that. We'll include more details on 4A, 4B, 4C. There's 455 kindergartners following those 512 first graders, and we already are over 400 kindergartners, and it's May 1st. So the numbers the growth is coming. But Kathy, you make a good point. These are not decisions that can be made lightly.
No, not at
and
all.
The board's not. We're just trying to,
And
we just want to try to get some real good value over the summer so we can get honed in on a decision. But
And
we can
Kathy-
do options and we can pare them down.
And the other thing I think we need to keep in mind, and you were here for the high school renovation. When you spend the money to float bonds and you have all the expenses that go with all of that, do you want to do it twice? Do you want to just do it once? And, I think we need to hear from Mark what the difference is in $4 million over the course of a 30-year bond or whatever it is. So I think those are things we need to learn about too.
I also assume if we do option 4A, and then we want to add those last 7 classrooms later, that it's not the difference between C and A, that there's an incremental cost on top of that to restart construction and rebid and all of that too.
Great point.
Well, even from a construction standpoint, there's an economy of scale.
Right.
That the bigger the project, the lower the dollar per square foot.
Yeah. Joe, do you know how much of those projects, that money-wise, is added into here?
About for the generator and the air conditioning, it's just under $5 million.
That's good to know, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, if there's no more questions, I'll put together, like Dr. Christian said, some more options for A, B, and C with a little schedule, and I'll work with Kevin, and hopefully we can get that out to you guys relatively quickly and look for some direction, hopefully, in our June meeting. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
At this time, are there any other? That's where you go.
Thanks, Will. The second item on the agenda is the CMS track. So I'm going to start by showing a picture to try and give you a detail. Okay. So if I can, this might be easier if I stand up. I already speak loud. So this is the blacktop. This is where the synthetic track surface would be. And then obviously you have this stone. And so when we did the job with the intention. We were very concerned that we were not going to have the fence poles or any of that supply chain issue was going to come in. So we put the stone in because you did not want to take the blacktop from the track to the end and then have to drill that post through that same blacktop. So now we're kind of circling the wagon back because everything came back. And we got everything in, and now we're looking at the stone that's inside the fence. And now we're looking at, just bringing to the board the option of taking all that stone out now, bringing it back out, bringing it the same base as the existing track base, cutting the track base back 6 inches, giving it the same base, and then putting the same topping on top, 2-inch finish, and then taking the synthetic track finish to the fence. That's the option that we were looking at. Because, again, this was all done with the intention to get our students on that track as soon as possible. The way it worked out, again, would have did it for this to go to the fence originally, it would have been a little bit higher originally. So the reality is the bid was lower because we put the stone in the intention that we're not going to hit any supply chain issue. So again, I just more grab it. The large expense is tying this in appropriately so that this doesn't actually sink or heave over That's why it's cutting it back, because this base is really what's essential to us getting a good product that's going to last many years.
So, so Joe, what are the options are doing that or leaving it alone?
Excuse me?
The options are doing what you're saying or leaving it alone. So right there, what I'm looking at where the shadows of the fence are, is that a lane?
So, no, this is not a lane.
No. That.
This is a lane.
So if my child's running in that lane and gets bumped or stumbles, are they falling face first into stone?
They're going to fall in the stone area, yes.
Okay. That's all I need.
Right. So the change for that, it is a substantial change. It is around $113,000 to do it around the entire circumference of the track. Again, Dr. Christian and Mark and I did review the project budget numbers, and I don't want to speak for Mark, but he can speak. It would all be able to be done within the budget dollars of the project, meaning the middle school project. So it wouldn't be something that he would have to find that money somewhere else.
How much more would the original bid have been if we took the track out to that?
We're guessing probably right around $100,000 if we would have took it around. The
Okay.
same thing.
Thanks.
So you're saying we already have the money in the whole middle school project?
If you look at our available cash in our Just Fund 38, which is just for CMS, and you look at all our outstanding balances for the primes and a couple of the other outstanding invoices, we feel that we have enough surplus cash left to cover this. We would not have to pull it from Fund 32. We would not have to pull it from Fund 10, which is the district funded dollars.
I mean,
And then once,
no, go ahead.
and then once that's done, the track, like maintenance-wise, year to year, because I assume if the stones are left, those have to be maintained and replenished and
Right.
swept off the track, and so this gives a lot less maintenance, a lot less year to year
It does.
upkeep as well. Okay.
I mean, I think from a safety perspective, we need to put the track out to the fence.
I agree. And again, I hope everyone understands what our intentions were in doing it originally the way we did, trying to just make sure, we're looking at emergency generators that we're already being told 52 weeks plus out. So the supply chain became an issue. So what I need to get from the board is if I need to give direction to Penn Builders to move forward with that change, so we can continue and again with the goal of getting our students on that track, definitely in the fall of the school year, if not the summer prior.
And I mean, when I was driving by, I saw that they were moving ahead pretty good, and then all of a sudden they stopped. And I think you explained that you wanted them to stop to make sure we could get this decision made. So
Yeah, I thought it was. I met with Dr. Christian and tell him I thought it was important that now that we're there, we need to make another decision and say, okay, what do we want to do? We did get the fence post, so.
We thought there was going to be a delay, and
Right.
we were hoping to get the kids on the track this spring for track season. Unfortunately, weather then impacted getting the track put down. So now that we can't get the kids on there, unfortunately, we'd rather make the good long-term decision. We had a conversation with KCBA sort of about the timing of this message, but that's neither here nor there at this point. And so while they're still out here working, we don't want them leaving and having to come back up and set up. Let's get it done, and let's get this thing finished off and stay within the overall budget.
And is that number a firm number they quoted us, or just kind of a rough estimate?
Yeah, it's firm. The actual firm number.
113 and.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I put it on the page for you. It was $113, $6.60. If there's no more questions, the last item on the agenda is the Plymouth White Marsh East Wing elevator. Excuse me again. We spoke about the elevator several years ago, and we actually put it out for bid in October of 22. And we've received, unfortunately, we were looking for 3 different primes in this. There was to be a plumbing prime, a general construction prime, and an electrical prime. We did receive 2 of the 3 primes back and got a number of $780,000. Let me start with, I guess the issue with the elevator is what we're called non-conforming compliant, which is a nice term for we're grandfathered. So there's nothing currently illegal or wrong with the elevator. The elevator is legally being used. So the issue was, do we want to make the elevator compliant to today's standards? The reason why it wasn't done during the renovation is because if you don't touch it, you don't have to renovate it. It does fit a wheelchair with a person in there, but it's tight. So we're bringing up the topic again just to see the direction that the board wants to take it, and is it something that, we want to put back out for bid? But it's a very difficult project because if you put it on the outside, the only space that it can go would affect all the technology on the east wing. So we would spend an exorbitant amount of money, not that I'm putting money on ADA and moving the actual data room to put it on the outside of the building. To put it on the inside of the building, you're going to possibly affect the restroom on all 3 floors. But we thought we came up with a way where we could actually put the steel in and get the smallest compliant elevator by today's standard in that hole.
Joe, what is the, you said you got 2 of the bids?
Yes.
2 of the, which one's missing?
The electrical one.
So
now I can tell you that.
How much does that add to the number?
In speaking with KCBA today, we feel that the project would be around $1 million project.
Okay.
We were at $780 a year ago without the electric.
Without the electric. My other question is, what is the size of the current grandfathered elevator, and what is the size of the new ADA?
So the current grandfathered unit is 56 by 42. And to give you an idea, we would be looking at putting in an elevator similar to the science wing, which is 70 by, I'm sorry, because I took these measurements today, is 70 by 55.
It's almost twice as big. Almost.
No, I'm just giving you inches on the floor.
Right. I'm just saying that going from 56 by 42 to 70 by 55 is about 40% larger in terms of elevator, the car.
The width and length of it. So let me put it to you
Right,
this way: the actual depth of the current elevator is 42, and the depth of that science wing one is 50.
Right.
42 to 55.
But the area of it is still almost 40% more. So the current elevator that we have, I wish you had pictures that we could see, because I don't think all the board members understand what that elevator really looks like. Because to talk about it without getting inside of it is doing it an injustice. So the current elevator is not ADA compliant by current standards, by a long shot. I do believe that we had a current student, that wanted to take courses in the EDI and wasn't able to use that elevator. Am I correct with that statement?
I know we had to move one class.
So we had, okay.
But
So,
I don't recall anything this year.
not this year. It's a student that had the issue a few years ago when they wanted to take the EDI. So I very much would like to see this elevator come up to today's standards, because I think it's only fair. And we talk about inclusion and belonging and equity. And when you have a student who has to have a whole class moved because they can't get in the elevator to do that, that's not very belonging, right? So you've basically cut off floors of that building from that student, and that's not fair. It was my understanding that that particular student to take that class would have had to go outside the building to get into the EDI. I'm just saying, that's my understanding. So I know it's a lot of money, but I think when we look at how much we're putting into a track and how much we're putting into an addition and how much, making sure that we have the sensory room and all the other things that we need for special ed, that we need to make sure that all of our students have the same opportunity and the same methods, regardless of whether they're in a wheelchair or a walker. And I can tell you that the wheelchairs now, some of those specialized wheelchairs, are a lot bigger than the ones that you just, wheel yourself down the hall. So, and some of them have oxygen tanks and respirators as part of them, so it takes up a lot more space. So I really think it's an injustice not to move forward with at least getting the bids, getting the design done, and then taking it from there. So, I'm just very passionate about this. I know the student, I know the family, and I just think when we talk about equity and inclusion and belonging, this is the right thing to do.
Joe, how long does can this project be done over the summer?
No, it's going to take longer, and we would probably have to go to night hours when school starts. So we would start it in the summer, and I think that was part of the bidding issue, was trying to get it done in a tight time frame without doing night hours. So we would have to throw the night hours in there.
So during the fall, until it's completed, nobody could use the elevator at all?
Correct.
Do we have any idea how long that would take?
Again, I'd have to visit it. I'd hate to put a time frame on it, especially with trying to, get supplies today and steel and things. So I can gladly revisit all of this and get information for everyone. But I wouldn't want to put a time frame on it that would be inaccurate to you guys.
Additionally, we should go back and look at any other possible areas in the EDI wing. We certainly want to accommodate all of our students. And in my 6 years in the district, we're very proud of this programming that we do, and the program of studies at the high school is deep and wide. We want to give all students access to that. You can fit a chair in there with an adult, but I agree with you, Chris, there are more elaborate devices now and improvements for assistive devices for students who need them. So I remember coming to the district and you were wrapping up the construction on the high school, and that was one of the first things I went and looked at. So, but we can get the estimates on digging around the current pit and see what that would take and what the timing would be. But we should probably take another look at somewhere else in the building.
I assume that's something that Kevin can help us with?
I'm sure it is.
Having already done the renovations on the high school, you know it pretty well.
And it is, as
Get to work on it.
As I've said, I don't want our district this elevator to be a problem in which maybe an excellent teacher or some other members of the staff, as well as student population, maybe looks at going to another district because the accommodations just aren't there. They feel like we're not, fulfilling our duty to them. So I think that's just another reason to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, I will get working on it again start tomorrow, and start with trying to see, again, a time frame and what kind of bid packet we can get out there.
Yeah, but as Dr. Christian said, if there's another place to put it that won't disrupt 3 floors of bathrooms, if it could go down on the pool end of the building,
Right.
or something.
My question would be, if we're considering $1 million to get an extra 14-inch or 144 square inches to get the minimum possible acceptable one, is that the best use of funds? Is it one that we should just be like, let's get a real elevator that can fit the larger, and get, instead of a minimal improvement for a giant project that's going to take night hours and it's going to take the elevator out, should we just be like, project stinks to do, but if we're committed to doing it, we might as well get the numbers to do it right.
Sure. That would be the intention. I think I was just giving the information that, there are different size cars. That's what they call elevators, by the way. Cars, so.
We'll get to work on that.
Yep. You're welcome. And if there's no other questions, that is the last item on the FMT agenda this evening.
Sorry, I'm dragging this meeting out. Hi, my name is Parker Powley. I'm a student at PW. So you said that there will be a need to have construction of the elevator go during while school is in session, and the elevator will be unusable during that time. What solutions or temporary measures would be taken for students who need to use the elevator to be able to use that during that construction period?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that would be part of our planning process. When we figure out what would be the best option and where we want to put it, that would obviously be the main part of any option we select, is how we're going to keep, our students moving and getting to where they need to go.
We would also try to do the lion's share of the work in the summer months as much as possible to minimize not only disruption, but noise and odors, things that happen when you do construction.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Parker. Other public comments?
Any comment from the board? All right, well, we're gonna,
Take a break before finance?
all right, we'll take a break. Yep, 5 minutes. Anyone can speak. Did you have something?
Real quick, just my kids. Oh, my name? Okay, I'm John Denenberg. How are you? Good to meet you too. So my kids weren't in the district for a couple of years, and they came back, and now they're both in the middle school, 6th and 8th grade, and they both all year have been telling me that they've been. I get the sense that there's a lot of PTSD at lunch with the kids. My son, he didn't really know many people, so he's been telling me now he's starting to meet kids. Went to sit with his buddies on the lacrosse team, but then half the table is lacrosse kids, and then the other half are kids he doesn't know. And one kid just starts screaming at the top of his lungs, and my son just is humble. He's a big kid, and he's just like, "All right, I'm gonna leave, guys." You know what I mean? And this happens all the time. And so I just had this idea, and I asked them the fights that are happening in the middle school, and both my kids told me that majority of the time it's all due to seating or assignment. So I just thought, why can't they flip the switch and make it so that it's assigned tables at learning time, and then you have to sit there. Nobody can sit there and scream at you and tell you you got to get out of this table. It's happening all the time, and I think you would find that there'd be a lot less fight. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, so we're going to go to our break. Thank you for your comment. We're adjourned.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. I don't think it's
All right. All right, I'm going to call this finance meeting to order. Do we have any public comments on the agenda? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to turn this over to Mark.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carpenter. So we're going to get right into the agenda, following up on Mr. Lowry's presentation over the CS renovations. We're going to talk about the upcoming financing of the Colonial School District, Colonial Elementary School project, renovation project for 2023. So when we talk about a construction project like this, we need to understand two things: the use of the funds and the source of the funds. Basically, where's the money going? How much are we looking to spend? And then correspondingly, it's kind of like a cause and effect. We now need to know, we need to raise those funds. How are we going to pay for it? So this is just a summary of Mr. Lowry's presentation with 4 options. Option 1 being the $8 to $10 million price tag. Option 2 being 11 to 13 million. Option 3 being 14 to 16 million. And option 4, anywhere from 14 million to 22 million based off of which iteration we're going to go with, option 4A, B, or C. That's the spending plan. That's what we know we're looking at. Those are the dollars we're looking to cover. Now, the source of the funds is going to be contingent off of which direction the board would like to go, off of which option we're moving towards. I think after tonight's meeting, we have a better general idea as to the option 4. So I'll start moving towards developing financing options and a plan for how we're going to bridge the gap of 14 to 22 million as far as paying for it. Now, the other side of it, like we talked about, is the source of the funds. 2 options: either fund balance, resources that we already have in Colonial School District, or, as the board is well aware, going out to some type of debt instrument, whether that's a bank qualified loan, some type of short-term debt instrument, or a long-term general obligation bond debt, which the board is more familiar with. We've taken them out for the CMS project over the 2020 to 22 C issuances. So we want to talk about source of funds in 2 different buckets. Like I said, the current general fund and capital fund balance is made up of the assigned balance, the unassigned balance, and the committed balance, bringing a total general fund balance of $28.5 million. Now we're using $1 million of that already to help offset the 22-23 budget. At the end of the day, the available resources in the general fund is $27.5 million. Add to that the capital reserve fund balance, again, resources in the capital reserve fund balance of $13.6 million. That gives us total available resources of $41 million in our fund balances for both the general fund status and the capital reserve status. So we need to think of that as one option of a resource to use to help pay for whatever option we want to move forward with the renovation project. The other source of funds, as I just mentioned, is issuing some type of debt. Now, there's factors around that issuing debt is what's the current rate environment? Are rates favorable now? Are they not so favorable? And we'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation. The other part of looking at our debt structure is, do we have any refinancing option? Just like a mortgage, where if you're paying a mortgage at, let's say, 5%, but you know that you can refi down to 3%, you decrease your monthly payment. So is there any options available with us with any of our current debt? Can we take any of our existing debt, refi it, decrease that overall payment, and then move forward and issue new debt? And then obviously, anytime we issue debt, there's always an impact on the budget in the year that we issue it, as well as future years, and then commitment in investing in paying for that debt. So let's talk about just fund balance. As the board knows, the fund balance is one of the pieces of the overall financial position and strength of the district. When we have rating agencies such as Moody's or S&P come in and want to look at us for evaluation purposes, it's almost like a piece of the credit score. How much money do you have in your fund balance? What is your enrollment? What is your investment in your capital reserve? It's a part of the overall picture. So that's just one thing we have to be mindful of when we're evaluating our fund balance. Like I said, it allows the district to maintain the AAA rating as we currently have right now. Moody's looks at our overall picture, our overall financial and enrollment, and then they give us a rating. The AAA rating right now allows us to borrow at the lowest possible rate for municipal bonds. So that's something that we want to make sure that we protect, because if we lose the AAA rating, it increases our debt borrowing costs. It's almost like having a detriment to your credit score, and then all of a sudden you go for a mortgage and now your rate is higher. So that's a piece of the overall puzzle that we kind of have to put together. Now, the general fund, as you know, is made up of a balance that's used to help mitigate future budget tax increases, as well as offset specific expenditures within the committed balance. Within our committed balance of $16 million, we have funds in there to offset large retirement, PSERs, healthcare. Those are dollars that have been earmarked by the board to help offset those future costs. So that's it's a piece of the fund balance, but it's funds that are really earmarked already for other future expenditures. So that really leaves us left with the unassigned fund balance of about $11 million. Again, I put that little chart down at the bottom to show the projected fund balances of $27 million between the general fund and the committed, the capital reserve of $13 million. So that gives us about $41 million in fund balance. However, as Mr. Lowry and Dr. Christian have presented to you, we also have a 5-year capital improvement plan. Those are facility needs that we have to invest in over the next 5 years, just to make sure we stay up to speed with our investment in the facility in the district. This includes roofing projects, parking lot projects, elevators, generators. I was not specifically bringing up elevators for that purpose, but so that's just a piece of the overall puzzle when we're looking at fund balance. While it's great, we have almost $41 million in reserve. We also have a 5-year capital project that is almost, pushing $50 million. And this is just a refresher on our capital improvement plan. You can see next year alone, we're looking at an investment of $1.4 million across the district, $4.9 million the year before, 2.6 the next year, almost $4 million to 26, 27, and 27, 28 is $36 million. Now there is that $30 million in there for the potential of a new elementary school, but I wanted to just include that as the overall piece. But again, if you're looking at it from a purely next, 5 years, we're looking at anywhere from, almost $12 million just in capital improvements on that. So when we talk about financing options, yes, it's great that we have the fund balance and the reserves. However, we do have future investments in our facilities that we are going to have to take into account. So that then moves us to the other side of the aisle when we talk about issuing debt. Again, we talked about current rate market. As it stands right now, the current rate market is actually favorable, even with the rates rising over the last couple of years. I'm going to jump 2 slides, I apologize, because here's actually a rate chart, which I thought was really interesting, and it shows not only just the record low interest rates over since 1993 as identified by that green bar, but then also the yellow bar shows you the record high. The current rates as it stands right now is identified by the blue bar, and that's actually at a 30-year general obligation bond that is only at 3.18%. So while, like I said, rates have been going up and the Federal Reserve is talking about increasing another 1/4 of a point, the rates are still very attractive as far as municipal bond rates go. So that's just a piece of our overall factor that we want to think about if we want to find proceeds for this project through debt. Again, we want to look at the ability to refi debt. We have a potential savings on 2017 issue that we had for the one of the previous projects. And this is something that we'll work with our financing partners over at PFM and Raymond James, and we can get them in here to explain it more. Again, it goes back to the potential refi to save dollars. Right now, that bond is callable, and right now we're paying at 5%. If we can refi that down to a 3%, we could get some cost savings, and then potentially work in new debt to try to keep our debt level and flat over the next couple of years. How I just mentioned that the borrowing rates, while at 3% roughly right now, we're earning almost 5% in our bank account. So that's what they actually call a thing called positive arbitrage. It's a fancy way to say that we're earning more than what we're incurring in expense. So what the initial thought would be that if we do want to pay for this project with a GOB or some type of debt instrument, we would go get the money now, knowing that we're not going to be spending it for another year. So we could have a full 12, even 15 months of earning interest income on that money that we would pull from the proceeds from a debt, put it in a bank account. Potentially we could earn $800,000, which we would then earmark to pay for the interest expense on the general fund budget over the next couple of years. Try to create a budget neutral effect on this issue of the debt. That's just a piece of the overall project. And now this is all contingent on when we go out to market, when our financing partners can, put the bond paperwork together, and if the bonds is something that we want to, a path that we want to go. But it's exciting from my standpoint to see that we can actually earn more money than what we would incur in interest expense over the next, 1 or 2 years. So that would be an interesting factor to see. Again, this is our debt service obligation, and you can see over the last couple of years, my predecessor, Dave Zablowski, and the administration worked very hard to keep our debt service expense overall level. We don't want to see huge jumps. We didn't want to see, large takeoffs in, future debt service payments that would have a huge effect on our budget and our tax rate and just the overall. So trying to keep it as level as possible is something that we would want to work to as well if we had to introduce this new bond for the 2023 CES renovation. This is the graph, and this is me just kind of getting excited about when it comes to numbers, is that we can earn on 4.8 on only having to incur 3.3 in interest expense. And just being able to go get that money and sit on it for a year, because the rules around it state that we don't actually have to spend it for anywhere from 16 to 24 months. So if we were going to do it, we could work with our financing team now to go get that money and start earning as much as we possibly can. We would lock it up probably in a longer term CD to try to earn as much yield as possible. So that would be a very attractive factor in that regards. The biggest thing here now is, I don't mean to put Mr. Lally in front of me here, but the board and administration needs obviously to decide on a path forward. Option 1, 2, and 3, I believe are kind of being pushed off to the side. So it's going to come down to option 4, A, B, and C. After this meeting, now knowing what I know, I'll start reaching out to our financing team. We'll have them put together some calculations to say, okay, what can we do if it was 14? What can we do if it was 18? And what can we do if it was 22? To see then what the effect of that would be as far as budget investment, in those dollars to pay off for that debt. And then correspondingly, how can we offset that increase? Can we do a refi? What does interest income look like on those earnings? But that's something that, I'll start to work with our team while Mr. Lally, Dr. Christian, and the rest of the board really starting to narrow down which plan we want to go with. And then I'll come in and we'll put together a financing strategy in terms of that. So that's my next steps. We'll see which option we want to pursue. We'll determine then how to best fund that project. And we can put some options together, whether it's a mix of maybe a little bit of fund balance and mostly debt, or we just do all debt. I think the most attractive thing right now about the debt is that positive arbitrage. We can go get the money, earn the interest income, and essentially pay for 1, if not 2 years of debt service on those bonds, just on the interest earnings alone on that.
Can I ask a question?
Yep,
Because you're giving us so much information,
Sorry
and I'm
about
afraid
that.
that I'll
You can
get
cut
it
me off
mixed up.
anytime, Chris.
So if I ask it now, then it'll be coherent, I hope. So in the 22 million dollars, and Joe said we had those items in the 5-year capital improvement project, right? And he said it was about $5 million.
Yep. Yeah, it's about 5.5.
Right. 5 what?
It's $5 million.
Okay. So how would we otherwise have paid just for those $5 million on the capital improvement list?
So if that project if the project was $5.5 million, we would have continued to use that as a part of our planning strategy, getting towards it. As you can see, our capital reserve schedule is right up there. We have approximately $13 million in capital reserve right now. So putting that $5 million in the 24-25 year, would have brought that year to $9 million. It would have been a conversation we would have had as well. I mean, just now, I think it's part of the entire development of this thing. If we were going to use capital reserve or bond, that would have been a conversation either way.
Okay,
just
so
working towards it.
We would have these same conversations.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions as far as, I know I have a little bit more homework and, and we'll, now that I have a better idea of which way we're working towards as far as, price tag here, I think I can put something a little bit more in depth and as well as have some of our professional team come in and really look at things closer.
The 1.2 million we have for 24-25 allocated to CES, is any of that part of this project?
That is not a part of this project.
Separate thing. Okay.
Separate. Yeah, I pulled out anything that was renovation specific. Yeah.
Oh, now I forgot my question. I'm sorry. Dang, sorry.
All right. Okay, if there's no more questions, is it okay if I move on to the next item?
Oh, one other question.
Yep.
Have you heard any rumors about Pennsylvania restarting PlanCon?
I've heard rumors, and that's about as far as it is right now. There is a part of the governor's budget to fund that account and fund new construction projects as part of the PlanCon. It's kind of a wait and see. But if that is something that is funded by the state, by the Commonwealth, if we could take advantage of that, we will.
The odds are that this project wouldn't qualify because it's new construction, but theoretically that 5-year out elementary school project would be eligible for it, and then the money would run out and we'd never actually see it?
Exactly.
Okay.
Did they ever finish paying off the money they had promised in the last plan come?
I don't know. It depends on the district you talk to. Yeah.
So I do
We're
have,
st-
I've remembered my question, sorry. So the $11 million unassigned fund balance,
yes.
what level should we keep in there to keep, like, when we look at that AAA bond rating, like, what would be,
So the way the rating agencies work is that they don't look at just the unassigned. They look at your overall fund balance. And what they want to see is they want to see a minimum of 20% of your expenditure budget as a part to equate your overall reserves. So if our budget is $150 million, they want to see $30 million in reserves. If you look at our, we're right around $41 million. If we were to pay for this entire project with our reserves, that would just about not only wipe out our reserves, but also decrease our rating on that. But yeah, that's what they look at. They look at it from an overall perspective, all your funds, as far as general and unassigned and committed, and then your expenditures multiplied by that 20% rate.
And then the state also has a rule that there's a maximum that our unassigned fund balance could be at as well. It's as a percentage, correct?
Of budget. Yep. And then the board has a board policy that our unassigned fund balance cannot go below 5% of our expenditures as well. That would be about $7 million. So that would, if that was a piece of this overall process, we'd also have to look at that policy and go from there.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'll have more for the June meeting, but for now, if we can move on to the 23-24 budget, is that okay? All right, so 23-24 budget update. So I apologize. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Joe. Okay. 23-24 final proposed budget. We are going to revisit this from our last committee meeting and board meeting. Just as our standard rate here, as Colonial is at 24.395, third lowest in the county, only above Wissahickon and Upper Marion. Colonial School District Act 1 Index, again, has not changed since our previous meeting, something that was stipulated by the Commonwealth at 4.1%. We did see a small change in our assessment values over this last month. We went up from 4.2 million to 4.4 million. So what impact did that have on our budget? Where does our budget stand as of today? The two notable things that affected our revenue standpoint is that, like I said, the property assessments from Conshohock and Plymouth and White Marsh resulted in an increased property assessment increase of $100,000. So just on assessment changes alone, we picked up $100,000 in revenue, as well as there was an increase in state basic education funding estimate of $150,000. So that brings our total projected revenue for 23-24 to $148,516,547, which is up 2.99% from the prior year, 22-23. This is just a breakdown of those projected revenues, similar to the slide in the previous presentation last month. And again, the only real changes here is in the current real estate taxes of $100,000 increase and the state revenue of $150,000 increase. And you can see year over year budgeted, we are now projecting $148,516,547 for budgeted revenue purposes for next year. $4.3 million increase from the 22-23 budget revenue. On the flip side of it, as we've discussed in prior meetings, are the budget considerations. Student enrollment projections, which obviously has a big increase on our personnel. Our personnel needs have been increasing. But on the corresponding side of it are retirements that we've been notified by our CEA members have been a savings. Wages and salaries, we are contractually obligated for our collective bargaining agreements, employee benefits, pension costs, and health benefits costs. Special education and VOTEC tuitions are two items that we've talked about, just as the driving nature of enrollment, increased expenses, especially in special education and VOTEC. The one positive side, or one positive aspect from an expense side, is that this past month we were able to lock in our diesel, gas, and heating oil rate. The MCI, we work with the MCIU, who then works with Provident Energy to look at the rate for these commodities every day. Every day we get an email saying, here are the rates, what would you like to do? We always have the option to lock in and we chose to wait these last couple months. This past week, rates got to a point where they're almost a full 75 cents lower than what we had locked in prior year. So of the 55,000 gallons worth of diesel fuel we committed to, we locked in at 2.74, which is almost $0.75 less than the prior year, saving roughly $100,000 between diesel and gasoline and heating oil. So there is about $100,000 in savings on the utility side in that nature. So full picture swing is a change to the bottom line of increase in or a decrease of $350,000 in, a change for the positive to the surplus of $350,000. Personnel costs, as always, they're one of our biggest factors. We are sitting at 70.39% of our annual budget. We added 5 new positions for the 23-24 school year, and we have a handful of retirements. Health insurance came back with an overall increase of 9.5%. Now that's a weighted average of medical increase of 13.2% and a decrease in prescription of 13.7%. I personally thought prescription was going to be in the positive range, but I was happy to see that it was a decrease for the year going forward. The PSERS rate, as we've talked about before, is certified at 34.7, which is a decrease of 3.57% from the prior year, and that's contractually obligated, to the state. So how does this look from an overall budget expense impact items? Salary and wages, even though we are contractually obligated to our collective bargaining agreements, they remain somewhat favorable at 0.98% increase, $646,000. Our benefits, again, based off of the 9% increase from the consortium, up 4.5%. Professional services, we're specifically special education aides, is looking like we're trending at 5.9% increase. Contract services, 4.85% increase. Purchase services, this is our transportation, this is our charter school tuition, this is our VOTEC tuition. This is the largest driving factor of the 23-24 budget. Sitting at $2 million increase from the prior year, almost 13.03%. Supplies are looking up $667,000, a 12.31% increase. Equipment up $220,000, $248. We spoke about how we've had to move the expenses related to vehicles and snow blowers and mowers over to the general fund. But again, these are all numbers that have been regurgitated at prior meetings. I just wanted to make sure we address them again. So total budget for the 23-24 year from an expenditure side puts us at $151,153,201, an increase of 4.09%, or roughly $5.9 million increase in expenses. Again, the driving factor is going to be that increase in benefits due to the 9% in healthcare and prescription, as well as the increase in our purchase services. So overall, what does that do? Well, with revenue of $148,516,000 compared to expenditures of $151,153,000, that puts us in a deficit status of $2,636,654. We bridge that gap with a 0.625 mil tax increase or a 2.56% increase to our millage rate. As I mentioned, the Act 1 increase is 4.1%, so 2.5% is right there. How did we get there? This is just a little summary. We started off in January 23 with an initial measure of 2.54%. We then worked with the variables that we knew as they were, as we started gaining more information. In February's meeting, we were at 3.25. At March, we were at 2.27. This past April, when we passed the proposed final budget, we were at an increase of 2.9%. And then ultimately, right now, tonight, we are looking at a 2.5% increase, a decrease of 0.34% month over month from the prior presentation. Again, this puts us at, or here's your historical tax rate versus Act 1 index for Colonial School District. A 2.56% tax increase would be below the PDE base 1 index of 4.1 and would move our CSD tax rate to 25.02. The budget timeline moving forward would be the budget adoption based off of the 2.56% increase at the May 25th board meeting, and then just the June Finance Committee meeting. The one last slide I wanted to point out, though, is going forward, if we were to act the 2.56% increase, it would put Colonial at a 25.0200 millage rate, and you can see where that would put us in comparison with all the other districts based off of their current millage. So this does not account for any changes that they might have, but it just shows that even with our change and all other things considered, we are still third lowest in the county, only above Wissahickon and Upper Marion. And the last slide would be discussion points.
So all of this is without any use of fund balance?
Yes, correct. And I can pull up the tax increase versus fund balance illustration. So at 2.56% increase as indicated by the yellow line, on a $100,000 assessed value, it would be $62.45 increase. On the median value of properties in the district, it would be a $95.46 increase. I apologize. And on a $200,000 property, it would be an increase of $124.90. And again, this is at 2.56% increase with no use of fund balance.
Based on the current year's budget, I know we have $1 million in fund balance going towards offset some of the tax increase from this current fiscal year. What are the odds that we're going to need to use that money to balance our budget based on the current projections?
I think off of, if you're looking at if you're tracking our expenditures, I think everything is tracking about how we have budgeted for it. I think when we look at the 22-23 summary on one of the next presentations, you're going to see that we have seen significant decreases in transfer taxes, delinquent taxes, interim taxes. So I think that those revenues are not going to come in as strong. So the $1 million that we did earmark for this year's fund balance, I think is going to be on target. As in addition to that, the special education, the transportation is just it's exceeding budget parameters for the current year. So with the board's permission, then we would move to the final budget for approval at the May 25th board meeting with a 2.56% tax increase.
Anybody want to use fund balance at all? I mean, I would.
Use our fund balance.
Do we want to have a discussion about whether to use some fund balance to offset this or not?
And if we're looking to go out for a debt instrument, this is where we need, right, yeah. And then that gets into the whole conversation about maintaining that AAA rating and trying to keep those reserves strong to then be as attractive as possible to have as little financing costs as possible.
So Mark, if I'm reading the chart correctly, if we were to say put $1 million of fund balance towards this again, that would take the rate down to approximately 2% increase, the very bottom line on there.
Yeah, it'd be it'd be a little bit below that, but yeah, I think it'd be closer to 1.86, I believe it is.
And then comparatively, if we were to say we want 0% tax increase, we have a $2.6 million deficit, then all of a sudden, what sort of things do we have to look like we're cutting?
Yeah, well, as we always talk about, we want to make sure we don't ever get behind the 8 ball, right? And doing a 0%, obviously, while it is always something we want to work towards, with the amount of construction projects we have, with the increased enrollment, with the investment we're going to have to make in staff and personnel, we want to make sure we don't put ourselves in a bad position for going forward.
2.9 last. Last month was 2.9, was the
Last month
projected
was
increase.
2.9,
So
we were able to get it
the
down
one
to
we
2.56.
voted on, or the one we presented at the school board meeting was 2.9, so this is 0.4% lower.
And how much does, and I know, in the projected revenue, if you could go back to that slide. Where are all of the new construction and new real estate taxes in there?
That would be in the current real estate taxes.
Okay, and so that's taking into account everything that should be built in.
Everything.
Okay,
So
got it.
we were able to harvest that $100,000 in increased real estate tax revenue based off of those new assessments that came online.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're currently at 11 million in unassigned fund balance. If we say we are probably going to need, although if we did the elevator, we could probably take that out of capital reserves, couldn't we?
Yeah.
If we need
Yes,
$1 million
that would
for an
be option.
elevator, that could come out of capital reserve.
Yes.
And then if we needed to take $1 million for this to get us to under 2%, then we're still at 10 million unassigned, which would still keep us a AAA rating.
Yeah.
You would assume.
So if we end up with a surplus because of more real estate and more EIT, we could use that money directly towards the building project.
Yes.
Okay.
If
Rather than building our fund balance up, we could
Right.
just
we
borrow
could,
less.
if we have a surplus in the general fund, to the extent where we would need to move money, we could move that to the capital reserve and then use that as a piece of the financing option to pay for the construction project. So if the construction project, for example, is $20 million and we've determined that $2 million worth of surplus in our general fund, we can move over to the capital reserve to pay for it, then we only have to finance 18. That would become a whole piece of the pie. Using fund balance going forward for 23-24 would handicap that option a little bit. I'm not saying it's not something we couldn't do, but if we're looking at major construction projects, elevators, personnel, there's a lot of investment going forward that we're going to need throughout the district.
So if we were an insensitive organization and we just said we wanted to pre-raise the money, we could say we're raising taxes 4.1% and we'd have $2.6 million, basically an extra $2.6 million sitting there to start this project.
Yeah, there was a lawsuit about that in
Yeah.
another district recently.
Let's do it.
I thank you. I thank
Make your statement.
I thank you for the work to play with these numbers and bring that
Of course,
tax number down. Thank you.
of course. So if the committee is okay, we'll move forward with the 2.56 for the final budget adoption at the May 25th board meeting. We'll have that put together. Yep.
Just to confirm, this is kind of our last chance to change it if we did want to do anything else, or is the June finance, sorry. Right, it's already been sitting.
It's sitting right now for the 30 days. It's slated to be approved May 25th. If you could theoretically make a change that night. Once it's approved, you would have to reopen the budget to do it in June. I believe it would have to sit another 30 days. So this is the window.
Yes. So.
It could come down more.
It could, and I would push for it to come down more and use some of the fund balance, but knowing we have all these projects ahead.
We're going to borrow.
as
We're going to borrow at a
we
great
are-
rate.
We are going to borrow, but if we don't have to borrow as much and we can use any extra money that is left towards that, that's even better in my view.
Well, then I'm also thinking, I heard a lovely number of we would accrue some interest of 700 to 800,000 possibly if we borrow money and put it and just, put it away till we use it. Why would we want to borrow less? We're going to borrow to use, we can borrow to gain. I get this. Administration, it's nice to have for all things, right? More cushion. I get that. But I'm thinking about the
The taxpayers.
Positive arbitrage would only be for 2 years for that. We're paying it out over, is it 20 years, I assume? Think that if we borrowed at 30, think whatever the bond issue would be.
Anywhere from 20 to 30-year issue.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
yeah,
you
from that
remember,
ahead,
we're gonna-
short term, then we spend it and we're
When
paying the interest
no,
on
I
the
get
long
that.
term.
Yeah.
With,
I'm
the
sorry.
borrowing, we would try to harvest as much interest income as possible.
What percentage of our taxpayers have children in school, and what percent don't? I feel like I don't remember that number.
In any school
Somewhere-
district, I would say it's 75-25,
I think,
maybe even 80-20.
I think the last time I got that specific number, it was about 20% of our residents have kids in our schools at the current moment. So 80,
Yeah, so I think it's between 75 and 80%
yeah.
do not have children in schools. And that's most school districts. It is. It could be lower, it could vary, it could be plus or minus 3 to 5%.
Move on to the next item.
All right, thank you. So we have 5 informational items we'll try to get through in a timely manner. On a lighter note, we have the Colonial Middle School 6th grade spring musical production to be held on May 5th and 6th at the middle school. They are putting on the musical Willy Wonka Kids. And just like any other production, we always want to make sure that we not only advertise it, but then also put it in front of the board to make sure we get approval to pay all of the hardworking contractors and employees. So Amy?
The laws of physics prevent me from being an Oompa Loompa. The largest Oompa Loompa ever. I asked Amy today, I saw Amy today, and if you remember the last show, whose name escapes me right now.
Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins, thank you. And I saw the student flying across the top. Oh my, got nervous. And after the show, I went up and I gave her a big hug and said it was fabulous, but I never want to see a kid fly across the stage again. And she said, "You paid for that. That's part of the construction." So I called Joe on my way home. I'm like, "We paid for this. We actually approved this."
They'll be doing Peter Pan next year.
Yeah. I'm going Friday night. Can't wait to see it. I know we'll get back to Mark.
You're fine.
She has 86 graders in the show. Just 6th grade. So she would have had, yes, there are.
Yeah.
She would have had, if she did 6th, 7th, and 8th, she would have had 160 kids in Mary Poppins. So it's a great thing, but it also creates an expectation. So we're going to meet with Amy, talk about future years and what we can do. But it's great to have that many kids involved. And the parents were dropping off set stuff this morning. A lot of excitement in the building. Sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Having said that, we just want to make sure we got this budget document in front of the board, specifically just so we could have approval to pay the contractors and the employees once the show is over. You can see that she has a wide range of contracted positions from producers, technical directors, costumers, acting, coaches, hair, makeup, and stage crew managers. She does, she really takes care of the cast who are, like you said, made up of all those 6th graders. She has a, after cast party. But again, we just want to make sure, one, we got this from the board for approval, and then just give a little bit of advertisement for the musical coming up on May 5th and 6th. The next item on the agenda is the copier lease. This is the copier lease renewal for the period of July 1, 2023 to June 30th of 2028. It is a 5-year, 60-month renewal for 138 copiers and printers. This is the district-wide fleet, as they call it. It's every printer and copier across the entire district. We received 4 quotes: Fraser, Edwards, and Canon. You can see that the monthly costs as well as the software costs are listed for Edwards and Fraser. Canon and Ricoh did not give us any software costs, so that would be in addition to that. Long story short, the administration is recommending Edwards for a couple reasons. One, Edwards is the existing supplier of all of our copiers and printers in the fleet. They're listed at a monthly cost of $9,264, well below Canon and Ricoh. The decision to recommend Edwards, like I said, was based on the fact that the equipment's already here. They have been a great partner with the district over the last few years. Their service is incredible. Their equipment meets the district's needs. There will be no new management software needed and no new configuration with the IT department of this Colonial School District. So with the committee's approval, we'd like to move this forward to with Edwards and contract with them for the next 5 years. Okay, any questions? No. CMS fitness equipment. This is a project that we've been working on with Advantage Fitness at the and the teachers over at the new building. What it has here is, and we worked with Ed Merck specifically in the curriculum department to do a build out of the equipment room of the fitness center. You can see that we have multiple different training stations for cardio. We have treadmills, and we have row bikes and stationary bikes, as well as some strength training. There's leg extensions, calf extensions, there's dumbbell racks, there's flat benches, there's wall mounts, and then there's also some adjustable benches for the kids to use. We initially started with maybe 2 or 3 months ago with Advantage Fitness. They came out, they did an entire layout proposal of the room. It was presented to the curriculum department as well as the CMS Health and Physical Education department. They went back and forth. There was a lot of research into what would be beneficial for the kids from a curriculum nature as well as a safety aspect here. So I just wanted to get this in front of the board to let you know that this will be something that we will get a purchase order together and try to get this equipment in. If not by the end of this year, then absolutely for the beginning of next year.
Is this the same folks who did the high school stuff? Awesome.
Mark, I don't know if you can answer. I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was going to ask if it was lease or purchase.
I'm sorry?
I was going to ask if this is lease or purchase.
So we went with a purchase because as attractive as the interest income rates are right now on our money, financing and leasing rates are 9, 10, 11%, at a cost of about $57,000 for all this equipment, including a preventive maintenance plan for the next 3 years. We thought that buying it outright was the
And we're getting new good stuff then.
brand new
Yes.
out of the box,
Rock and roll.
as well as, like I said, a maintenance and preventive plan. So they'll come out twice a year, inspect everything, tighten up bolts, screws, clean it up. So, it gives their seal of approval twice a year to make sure that everything is operating correctly.
We allow our teams and students to use this outside of health class and phys ed.
Yeah, the teams after school, absolutely. So everybody knows too, if you're walk into the new gym at the middle school, it's in the back right-hand corner. It's a separate room attached to the auxiliary gym.
So a little glass area.
And Mark,
Yes.
I don't know if you can answer this, maybe you can, Mike. When we did the high school, we were, at least I was sold on spending the money because some of the equipment could be used by kids in wheelchairs, handicapped. Is some of this also adaptable to special needs kids?
Yes, I believe so, but I'll get the detail on that.
Thanks.
I had a question about the service agreement. You said it's twice a year for preventive maintenance, but what happens when it breaks? Is that included in that service contract?
Repair costs, the labor for them to come out and the time they spent is included, depending on the part and the severity of it. We might have to pay to replace them. It's just they're coming out to maintain it and tighten bolts and screws. If something breaks, we're covered for the labor and the time, but not the part itself.
And the equipment itself, how long is the warranty on it? So like a bike or has a motor or some type of display, is there like a, because we're purchasing it, sometimes they have like a 1 year, sometimes they have like a.
I'll have to follow up with you on that one. I don't want to speak out of turn and tell you it's a 3 year or 5 year, but I'll find out what it is.
Okay.
I'm sure there's not just a warranty from the seller themselves, but I'm sure there's also a manufacturer's warranty on the back end.
I have one more question.
Yep.
With this, what is the plan for like in the life cycle? Are we looking at 10 years holding? Since we're buying it, are we looking at replacing that 10 years or
I think so part of the impetus to get that maintenance plan is to try to extend the life of this as much as possible. We thought that if we're going to invest, $57,000 in this equipment, we want to also invest in something that'll extend the life as long as possible. We'll evaluate every year, and I'm sure the teachers down at the middle school will let us know if something is deteriorating to the point where it needs replacement, and we'll take that on a case-by-case basis.
They had actually a larger scope planned, and we talked about phasing that in over a few years. This certainly would be the largest purchase, but then we'll come up with a rotation just like we do for uniforms, textbooks, those types of things, so that we avoid bubbles. So we're not looking at a massive replace in 9 years. You know, the machines that get the most use, we'll look to upgrade them, you know, maybe 4 or 5 years from now, so we can smooth it out. We do the same thing with computers. Everybody try to do at least a 4 or 5 year rotation, smooth out the curve.
There was a smaller version of this in the old middle school, and
Smaller is being very generous. There was a glorified closet that had 20 bikes in it, and it was a very creative use of the space. Very creative. But this is, and really it's about teaching life fit, right? So it's part of the curriculum and lifelong healthy activity.
Okay, so if everybody's okay with that, we'll continue moving on. The next item is just a renewal for the district's real estate tax collector for Plymouth Township and White Marsh Township. We initially entered into a contract with them that runs through June 30th of 2023, which then also includes a 1-year renewal option for the next 2 years. As of tonight, we're recommending renewing the contract for the next year, which will run through June 30th of 2024. This is an annual renewal. They provide a great service. We work with them weekly, if not, daily on, especially when it becomes tax time in July, August, and September. So with the committee's approval, I'd like to move that forward to renew that contract. Okay.
How many years have we worked with this?
It's a 4-year deal.
It's a 4-year deal, but you said renew, so we had 4 years before that.
Let me rephrase that. It's a 2-year deal with an option to renew 1 year at a time for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
so we've completed.
So we are
2 years.
we're in the first renewal year.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Last item on the agenda is our ever favorite general fund budget comparison for April of 2023 to April of 22. Absolutely. Well, I kind of have, I got a little crazy this weekend. I got excited, and we now have graphs. But we can get to the graphs next. So, that's what I get excited about. So, as far as from a revenue standpoint, current real estate taxes, earned income taxes, our state subsidy, and other just various local revenues remain strong for the 22-23 school year. However, on the flip side, transfer taxes, delinquent taxes, and interim taxes have declined prior year due to the slowdown in real estate transactions. If you remember, 21, 22, and even the year before that, record turnover on not just commercial, but also residential houses, throughout the district. Federal revenue is trending a little bit lower right now, but I believe that's just due to a timing issue. We were more aggressive in prior years with spending that federal revenue on COVID-related supplies, masks, PPE. We are still spending the federal revenue. We are just, like I said, it's a timing issue. So that's the only reason that is tracking below. If you go to the second tab here, because I would rather see colors and a little bit more spelled out, you can see as I keep beating the drums on our transfer taxes, delinquent, and interims, I really thought it was important to show this to the board on a specific line item where we are tracking for our larger line items. I'll blow that up a little bit bigger. You can see our current real estate taxes are remaining strong, up 3%. Our transfer taxes are down or lagging, for better term, 20%, almost $556,000. Our delinquent taxes are lagging compared to prior year, 1.7 million, almost 59% decrease in prior year. Our interim taxes are lagging almost 40%, 907,000. And our federal revenue IDA, while lagging, I mentioned is just a timing issue. But I really thought that this was important. As much as we all like to look at that first slide, I thought that this is more descriptive, as more of a line item specific. So that as far as our revenues go. As far as obviously on the other side of it, our expenditures. Last year we were at 71% of our budget for wages. This year we're only at 66%, and that's because for the month of April we had 3 paychecks in the prior year, and this year we only had 2 paychecks. So we are literally one entire paycheck behind. So that is a driving factor in the wages. Correspondingly, with the benefits, because of that one less paycheck, as well as the healthcare holiday, we are trending lower than prior year, but as expected. Wages and benefits, while, like I said, are lower than actual and prior, are trending according to budget. The professional services is where we start to see the special education, the one-on-one aids, those dollars associated with special education. So we're seeing a 91% of budget on those dollars already as of April of 2023. Property services, we had various substantial maintenance projects, including roofing, HVAC, science department. We had some work done in there. Chromebook repairs, asbestos, a PE project, and sidewalk repairs. These projects have all been completed. Obviously, this is when we talk about investing in the district, but those were some of the notable items of why our 400 property services is 100% of budget for the current year. When we look at transportation, I'm really taking a fine-tooth comb to the invoices from First Student, so we are still 2 months behind. Really want to make sure that we're getting billed accurately for that. So while it is $1 million less than prior budget, I believe once we get those 2 months worth of dollars in there, that $1 million will then be reflective in that line item.
They are 2 months behind. You're not 2 months behind.
No, they're 2 months behind.
Right.
Yeah, we sent them back the questions and concerns, and we're waiting to get back from them. Yeah. Supplies are at 76%. Again, that's more or less related to the COVID decreased purchases this year than as opposed to prior year. Equipment, we've talked about before how we saw a larger increase this year due to the reimbursement to the capital reserve for the vehicles and mowers that were previously purchased by Fund 32. And the debt service and interest payments, as listed in other objects and other funds, are tracking budget and also according to our debt service schedules. So after all those descriptions, again, this kind of just puts it more in a better picture to see where we are on each individual line item basis for an object standpoint. We are, like I said, $1 million behind prior year, but that's mostly related to, you can see the wages, which is the one extra pay in prior year, and the effects of the transportation invoicing reconciliation with the vendor. So that is how we stand as far as the April 23 to April 2022 budget comparison. Any questions on that?
Just a quick question.
Yep.
The delinquent taxes,
Mm-hmm.
is that the amount that people are delinquent, or is that amount that they've paid up from being delinquent? Like when you have a change, I'm just confused as to what the change.
So what happens is we send our tax bills out in July. Ultimately, the taxpayer has until December to pay that tax bill. Then on this January 1st, the county actually liens those tax bills against the properties, at which point those tax bills become delinquent. So it's essentially any tax parcel that has not paid either their current tax bill or prior year tax bill. And it just becomes a matter of how many people did not pay their taxes, which then equates to the amount of dollars that are liened by the county and then what we would collect.
So if the change is in the negative, does that mean it's good for us?
No, it's bad for us. We collected less delinquent taxes. Yeah, so in prior year, we collected 2.8 million cash in the door. We actually deposited 2.8 million as of April. This year, we've only collected 1.1, so we are collected less. Absolutely, it can go back it goes back to, I know there's some on the schedule off the top of my mind going back to 17, 18.
I just thought that meant that the amount of delinquent was down, but it's, okay, thank you.
And it's it's the county's responsibility to go and collect those taxes. We have no jurisdiction to go there, get them. That's the county's responsibility for that. So,
Mark, one question. These numbers are through April 30th or through April 1st?
April 30th, the
Okay.
month that just ended.
And the fiscal year ends June 30th?
Correct.
Just curious, so our wages were at 66%, even though we're 10/12 of the way through the year. See, okay.
Yeah, June. Right, it's June 1st, June 15th, and then June 29th, I believe. But yeah, 3 pays in June. It'll all true up to the correct number of pays. It's literally more pays in the prior year for this month, less pays this year. In total, it'll all equal the 26 pays, but it's just a matter of sometimes how that Friday falls.
Gotcha. All right, cool.
And that is all for my agenda for tonight. If there's any other questions or comments?
All right. Do we have any public comments on tonight's meeting? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.